So before we get started with our presenter, I would like to take a few minutes to tell you about the export advice and support available for UK-based businesses on great.gov.uk. After my introduction, there will be a presentation from Victoria Bolston from Bolst Global on how to secure global success at international trade fairs, followed by a Q&A session. Any questions left unanswered during today's webinar will be replied to in the first instance by a DIT member of staff. Right now, the world wants UK goods and services. The quality of our products, our expertise, ethos of innovation, and creative way of thinking and problem-solving capabilities are all reasons why people around the world are looking to the UK for products and services. The demand is out there, and you should be too. Regardless of your exporting experience, you can access useful advice and support from great.gov.uk. It's the ideal starting point for UK-based businesses looking to export for the first time or for those businesses looking to do more. It brings together the best information from government, commercial and other partners. When visiting great.gov.uk website, you're able to select 3 different options: new to exporting, occasional exporter or experienced exporter. When selecting new to exporting, this takes you through to information on exporting topics such as the benefits of exporting, routes to market, how to create an export plan, and further information to help get you started. You will also be able to find information on other webinars, events, trade fairs and missions. Selecting selling abroad occasionally will also take you through to information on exporting, including how to sell online overseas. Use this service to help choose a suitable online marketplace to sell your products. And finally, by selecting Experienced Exporter, you'll be able to find information on our Export Opportunities service, a live export opportunities that have been sourced by our network of colleagues living and working overseas in more than 100 countries now. New opportunities are added to the site every working day, and you can use export opportunities to find overseas opportunities for your products and service. You will also be able to find information on how to register and create a profile for your business in our Find a Buyer service that matches export-ready UK businesses with overseas buyers and products and services. So please do visit great.gov.uk to find the advice and help you need to start selling overseas. And before we hand over to Victoria, we've just got a couple of quick polls that we'd like to run through with you. And a quick poll: have you attended an international trade fair, exhibited at an international trade fair, both attended and exhibited, or not attended and not exhibited? And all you need to do is just click on the most appropriate radial dial against the option and click submit at the bottom. And you're all being really quick this afternoon. We're already up over 70% of you have voted, got a big audience today. So I'll just give you another moment or so and then we'll close the poll and we'll share the results with you so we know what type of audience we have online with us today. Okay, so I'm now just going to close the poll and I'll share those results. So Victoria both attended and exhibited at an international trade fair is the highest with 50%, so that's great. But we do have 25% of our audience today that have not attended and also not exhibited at an international trade fair. So we'll just close that and I'll just move on to the final poll that we have today. And this is: what is your main challenge you face when having a presence at an international trade fair? And again, please do just select one of the options and click submit at the bottom. Wow, again, you're all really quick at doing this, so just give you another moment or so to put your responses in, and then again we can share the results with you. Okay, so I'm now going to close the poll and again share the results with you. This isn't any surprise, I don't think, Victoria. 59% saying lack of financial resource, and the next one, lack on confidence in return on investment, with 35%. So now we'll just hide that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce your presenter for today, Victoria. Victoria, please do go ahead.
Thanks very much, Jill, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this DIT webinar on how to secure global success at an international trade fair. As Jill said, my name is Victoria Balderson and I run a company called Bolst Global. So this afternoon I'm really happy to be delivering this webinar for you. I'm going to take you through a number of what I hope to be very practical tips and advice on how to go about exhibiting at an international trade fair, how to make the most of attending a trade fair as well as how to really make sure you get the most out of it for your business and what you're trying to achieve. So let's just start with a brief, a very kind of brief overview and introduction from myself. So as I said, my name is Victoria. I am originally studied languages at university. I've always worked internationally for SMEs, predominantly in the Yorkshire region in the UK. I'm a chartered marketeer, a qualified marketeer, and I also have an MBA as well. I've always worked for startups and SMEs, helping them to develop internationally within business development and marketing, and that's been predominantly within the medical device, food supplement and the health, food and drink industries. I've then more recently moved away and created my own business called Bolst Global, and what we do is we support SMEs within those sectors to internationalise through export strategy, business development and international marketing predominantly. In terms of the topic of today's webinar on international trade fairs, I think it has to be said I've done a fair few over the years. I was trying to count them up this morning actually as I was preparing for this, and I think I've done at least 15 shows over the past 5 years over a number of industries as well, and pretty much every continent apart from Australasia, where I've had some exhibition presence for companies, on behalf of companies or on behalf of my own company more recently as well. I've actually just come back from Dubai. I've been out twice already this year to exhibit in Dubai at the Arab Health exhibition, if anybody knows that one, for the healthcare industry, and more recently for Gulf Food, which is again a very large global exhibition in Dubai for the food and drink sectors. So in terms of today and the trade fair topic and what I'd like to go through, I mean, for me it's understanding what are the benefits of exhibiting. It's great to know that half of you have already attended a show and also exhibited at an international show as well, and I'm hoping to be able to build on some of the ways that you've done that previously, and so that you can in future build on that and develop your capabilities and get more from exhibiting and attending shows in the future. For those of you who haven't yet done so, I hope that this will also be a useful webinar for you and allow you to then pick up some really interesting hints and tips for you should you be looking at doing one in the very near future. I also do have my own e-guide on my website. Well, that will be available through email if anybody does want to email me at the end of the webinar for a bit more information and a short e-guide that's available free of charge. My email details will be at the bottom of this webinar at the end as well. So if you're interested in receiving that, please do get in contact with me. I'm very happy to share it. So let's start with talking about why do a trade fair in the first place? What are the benefits of having a presence at a trade fair? Well, from my experience, one of the great things is that it's an absolute hive of activity, particularly the larger shows. They bring together continents, regions, global markets for those industries and sectors that you work in. So what it allows you to do is to meet with people from not just one market but several markets over a very short space of time. So it can be very time efficient and cost efficient, because if you were to be going out separately and individually to various markets to gain insight and to meet with people and prospects or existing customers, then obviously that could take you a lot longer and be a lot more costly. By being at a trade fair, you're able to do that with the right planning and preparation in a much more condensed period of time, and also as well, it allows you to come into contact with a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily have met through your own, like I say, isolated visits to other markets or other types of marketing activities that you may be doing within your business. So it allows you to gain quicker market insights as well, a large number of contacts within a short period of time. Of course, some of those contacts are not going to necessarily be as relevant for you or convert into potential customers, but the fact is you're exposed to a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of market insight. Again, those contacts could lead to other connections or other ways of doing business. I mean, don't forget as well, you know, generally when we're at a trade fair, most people go with the key objective of making new relationships and building networks to sell to from a customer point of view, but actually it can be a really good way of doing lots of other things. So for example, to check out your competition, if they're there, if they're exhibiting, you can see what they're doing, what new products they have, how they are positioning themselves in the market. That can be a great way of gaining some insight there, both that you know of, and perhaps you can come across some international competitors that you maybe weren't aware of either. From an innovation point of view, you could be going out there for to try to develop new products, look at new launches that you may be interested in, or innovation that you can bring back to your own business as well. By seeing lots of different people at a trade fair, lots of different companies doing interesting things within the industry, that again can be a really good benefit of being out there at a show. Again, we think customer side, but don't forget the supplier side, and looking at your entire supply chain. It may be a case that you are going to source new products directly. There may be your suppliers that are attending that trade fair or exhibiting themselves, and again that could be another reason, another benefit of going out and visiting that particular trade fair. So there's lots of reasons why you can do that. Again, the trade fairs tend to have often seminars and other meetings, networking events going on around before, during, after the actual show time itself. That again can have added value. Whilst I was in Dubai last week at Gulf Food, there was a really interesting seminar going on related to the halal certification, a global forum that they were running just before the trade fair one morning, and that was a really good opportunity for me to go and understand better how they're trying to harmonise the halal certification, for example, and what it means for them. So that was a really valuable extra bit of insight as an example to you that I managed to gain by going out and looking at the other activities alongside the trade fair itself. And like I said, the shows, depending on which ones you go to, can have a completely global reach. The show that I did, Arab Health, for example, recently at the end of January in Dubai, we came back and we had over 100 leads from 35 different countries. So it wasn't a case of going out there and just thinking we would be getting leads from Dubai and the UAE and potentially the wider Gulf region. We actually had leads coming in from many parts of North Africa, and then also from Asia, I mean even a couple from the US and Canada as well. So some of the shows can have such a wide reach that there could be a real benefit from going out there, as I say, whether that's as an attendee, a delegate, or actually exhibiting out there as well. So lots of benefits to be had in doing so. Now, another key question that I see asked quite a lot is in terms of, well, which show is better for me? Because there's a lot of trade fairs that are going on over the course of a calendar year, and obviously, generally speaking, you know, for SMEs, it's challenging to know which ones or which one, from a resource point of view, it is best to funnel that resource into. And I would say it really depends on what you are trying to achieve as a business, and what your objectives would be at that show, which can help guide you to make a decision as to which show or shows, depending on your budget, would be the best fit for you. So have a think. I mean, this is very, very company specific. I mean, what would you be trying to achieve at that show in particular? Is it about gaining market insights? Is it about finding more suppliers, sourcing? Is it about reaching out to customers, finding information on a new market? Whatever it may be, that can help to guide you as to which one may be the good show for you. Obviously, within your industry, you'll be aware of the larger ones that are taking place. And what I would say is, speak to your networks and speak to your peers within your industry that are already exporting and perhaps already exhibiting at some of these events as well. Find out their views on whether it's a good show in their opinion, what they've managed to gain from the show as a result, whether they would recommend yourselves exhibiting or not, and also ask your existing customers and your suppliers as well. Find out who, which shows are they attending, why do they attend various shows, would they recommend it for what you do as well. And once you start to be able to see, okay, there's a few potential shows that could be of interest for us and what we're trying to achieve, you can actually often find on those websites for those trade fairs themselves a lot of information about the breakdown, the demographics of the type of people that attend the shows, the feedback that's gained from the shows from the last year. That information is collated. Now, obviously, some of it is going to be skewed to be rather favourable because it's the show organisers that are evidently putting forward this data, but I think you can read between the lines and see actually this could be the right target people that are attending, could be a really interesting show, that it will often tell you which countries and where the people are attending from. So again, that can help to guide you as to which could be a good show for you and what you're looking to achieve. Another area as well is that with DIT they do offer, and one of the things that you mentioned was financial support, and lack of financial resources is a key kind of challenge and hurdle. Well, within DIT there is access to what they call TAP funding, Trade Show Access Program funding, which if you haven't accessed before, you can do. Now, these are a list of shows and trade fairs that DIT have put some financial resource and backing towards, and I've put at the bottom of this slide the website, the gov.uk website, whereby they then run a list every financial year of which shows they are giving financial support to. So if you were going as an exhibitor to some of those shows, you would be able to access some grant funding to help you support that towards that, generally in the region between £1,000 and £2,000 depending on the show itself. But check that out and see if there is anything that could be relevant for you, and it obviously would allow you to bring down the cost of exhibiting, certainly for that show in particular. So in terms of another area I wanted to look at, and one of the things tying into that, I guess, is about finances and being cost efficient at shows. One of the things that we all know is that doing a trade fair, regardless whether it's national or international, can be a costly marketing exercise, and it's challenging to try and drive down the costs and make it effective and efficient. So one of the things I always say is, in terms of once you've decided upon a potential show that could be of interest for you, the decision as to whether you would attend that show or exhibit at that show, I think you need to do some further analysis in terms of what the costings could be. Because in some cases, it may be that attending the show is quite a costly exercise anyway, depending if it's obviously quite far in terms of the airfare over there. If it's in a market that is quite, cost of living is quite expensive, the accommodation can be quite expensive, getting around is expensive. When you add up the costs of going out, you may have to pay for your own delegate pass as well. You add all of those costs up, and then you look at the exhibiting aspect of it. yes, okay, it will be obviously a bit more costly, but what's the cost difference? It may not be that big that actually it could be worth having some form of an exhibition presence at that show to start with. And I'm not necessarily talking about taking a large stand for yourself. There are other options potentially that you could work out that could be a lower cost way of exhibiting. So one of the ideas is, and sometimes with DIT or some of the UK pavilions, there is an option for you to take a pod, what they call a very small pod. So you can have a pod within their stand, within the DIT stand, or you can put some of your marketing literature, potentially use part of their stand, have an area on their stand to exhibit at a lower cost than obviously having your own. Another way is to potentially, if you're looking at saving costs, is there anybody you know who is already exhibiting at the show you'd be looking at doing? And some of the ideas and things that I know people have done in the past include, is there an option to share stand space with somebody that you know? Would that work? Not always, but it may be a case that if you have complementary products or services, is there an option to team up with somebody else in your industry to reduce down the costing and be able to exhibit? Or could you use a table for meetings on their stand if you can't exhibit product per se? One of the key challenges is when you're an attendee at a show, and you know, maybe a few of you agree with this, one of the bigger challenges is actually finding a meeting point. So when you're trying to have meetings with people, when you don't have a fixed stand or a fixed space for yourself, it can be very challenging trying to find somewhere to meet with those people and find a space to have discussions and progress business. So it may be an option potentially to share some stand space or use a table with people that you know. Another idea, and what I've done in the past, you know, you may know somebody already exhibiting. If there's a cost to getting a delegate pass, you know, some trade fairs are free with it being B2B, but some of them don't. Some of them still charge. Gulf Food in Dubai last week, for example, was a chargeable trade fair. And actually, if you know somebody exhibiting, they may have some invitation, complimentary passes, they may have extra passes that they can give you. Again, ask the question, because that could potentially, you know, be a cost saving for you. Another area to look at would be with regards to your accommodation, and one of the things that I use quite frequently and I find fantastic is actually using the likes of Airbnb to be a lower cost, but not, you know, still good quality choice of accommodation, and it can be a lot more cost effective. And what it can allow you to do as well is you can, because the nature of Airbnb is that it's residential, that it can allow you to be closer to the showgrounds where you're going to be exhibiting or attending. So again, it's twofold, that if you can find somewhere close to the exhibition centre on an Airbnb basis, for example, you are able to not only reduce your costs that you may have incurred through hotels, which can be a lot more expensive, also at the same time you might reduce your transport costs down as well, because you're not necessarily as far out to reach it. Again, it's cost, but also it's time with that as well. When I was at Cial, Paris last October, I stayed very close to the exhibition grounds, which is actually quite a distance from Paris. So anybody that was staying in Paris had a long commute. I was close to using Airbnb. It meant 3 stops on the metro to get there. So it saved me a lot of time, and it was also a lot more a lot cheaper than staying in a hotel in Paris as well. And actually through Airbnb I actually met somebody else staying at the same place who I'm actually now in contact with from a business point of view. So it actually allowed me to network and meet a business contact as well, which was, I guess, an extra bonus. Another area again is transport. And I would say act like a local when it comes to using public transport, if that's something that you're quite happy to do. See if they have any passes. If you're going for a week, maybe there's a week pass that you can buy on the metro, on the bus, on the train, etc. Again, to drive some of your costs down. If you're exhibiting at the show, one of the considerations I would say is, do you work with local contractors if you're doing a stand build? You will have shell schemes available to you, but there may be times, and I've done this in the past, where I've used local contractors when I've exhibited out in India and out in Dubai as well, who could do a custom build for you on the stand and not necessarily charge you much more than what it would cost you for a shell scheme by the time you've actually purchased the furniture, brought in your marketing materials, and your delivery of your stand from the UK. That can obviously be quite an expensive exercise as well, and sometimes looking at local contractors can be cost efficient and allow you to have a point of difference on the stand as well, on the pavilion or wherever you're exhibiting, because it's custom built, so it's not you stand out from the other stand where they're using a shell scheme as well. And again, local manpower, so when you're thinking about putting the resource on your stand, are you going to use your own resource, your own people? Is there potentially an opportunity to use local people? That may be, particularly if you're wanting some support from a translation point of view, interpreting point of view on the stand. Could they be a good resource for you on the stand that, again, more cost efficient than you bringing out, you know, teams from the UK and obviously having to cover that expense as well. So have a think about some of those areas that can help you make the show more cost effective for you. Now I'm going to look at in terms of preparing for the show, and I think it's an area that a lot of people underestimate the importance of it. For me and my experience, the key areas are the preparation in the run-up to the trade fair, and then the follow-up once you finish the trade fair to then maximise the opportunities and develop those relationships and contacts that you've had. And a lot of people overlook that the middle bit, and actually being there is often can be the easiest part. You might not feel it at the time, they're long, they're hard days, but actually it's what you do before and what you do afterwards that for me will make or break an exhibition. So in terms of if you're looking at going to a trade fair as an attendee, and you know that might be when you've done some cost analysis or you've decided it's still more cost effective to go as an attendee, you don't want to make the full commitment to exhibit yet, you'd like to go potentially out first and just have a look at the show and have a wander around and get a feel for it. You know, that's absolutely fine. How do you then get the most out of being there for the show as an attendee? Now, the advantages you have is that you're obviously not restricted to being on a stand for a fixed period of time for a fixed number of days, so that allows you to be able to wander around and be able to then, you know, see a lot more of the trade fair that you don't necessarily get when you're exhibiting there. And it does also then allow you to potentially visit for a shorter time frame, so you could decide, well, I'm going to go for 1 or 2 days out of a 3, 4, 5 day show. So again, that can be efficient if you're effective with what you're doing and you can go in and have your meetings and go and see the people you want to see. It can be obviously less costly, less time consuming as well. Short space of time, in, out, and you're not obviously stuck to the stand for that duration of the fair. The challenges you do have, however, is, like I mentioned before, having a meeting point for people. You don't have a fixed place, so you need to be able to find somewhere that you can meet with people quite easily and have a discussion with them professionally. So that can be a challenge when you're trying to have meetings as well, and sometimes, like I said, being an attendee can be still expensive, so you need to weigh that up. In terms of the preparation, for me and my advice and what I've tell clients and what I do myself is, when you're looking at a show, you need to know and prepare in advance who you're going to see and what, you know, this comes back to your objectives, but it's who you want to see as an exhibitor and who you want to see that may be attending the show. Now, if you're going to try and find new customers, the challenge you also have is that a lot of those potential customers are probably not necessarily going to be exhibiting. If they're a distributor that you're trying to find, a partner in market, a lot of those people will also be attending the show just like you are, and you've no way of knowing without reaching out to those target people in advance who they are. Obviously the exhibitors tend to be more brands and producers, and they're showcasing their products, not necessarily interested in working with you as a customer. So, but you can still go through the exhibitor list and see if there is anyone there that could fit the bill for what you're trying to achieve, if you're trying to find new customers, and then trying to fix meetings with them. When it comes to potential other attendees, again, reaching out to those potential prospects in the week before, using social media, I think is again something that's really highly valuable. So if you have an idea of who you'd like to meet in terms of a potential customer or a retailer or whoever it may be, a distributor, and you already have an idea and you feel like they may be at the show, using LinkedIn can be a fantastic way of reaching out, trying to then fix a meeting, find out if they're attending the show and fix a meeting with them. You also need to make sure that you plan your route in advance. In some of the larger shows, and getting around all the halls can be quite tricky. So you need to spend a bit of time in advance looking at the size of the show and the halls and fixing your meetings accordingly as far as you can to try and make sure that you're spending time in the right halls at the right time and not having to go from one end of the show to another end of the show, which, if they're the larger global shows, that could take you 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. So just be aware of, who you're going to see and when, where you're going to meet. And also don't forget, as an exhibitor, because you're not restricted to the stand, if part of what you're trying to achieve are market insights, the show itself is one thing, but also what about looking outside the show? So for example, like I say, with Gulf Food last week, we were there for a number of clients, and part of it was also going out to stores and doing visits and understanding what brands are in the marketplace at the moment, what are the pricing of brands that are out there. So actually we did spend some time away from the show itself, to go around some of the stores and get some further insight whilst you're in market, that's beyond the remit of the show itself. That again was also equally valuable for what we were trying to achieve by being out there. So think about that as well. Is there an opportunity to, or can you dedicate some time as an attendee to be doing other things that would add value to what you're trying to achieve at that show or for that particular market where the show is being held. When it comes to being an exhibitor, if we move on to that area, again, the advantage of having a fixed point means you can have the meetings and you can obviously showcase your products. So straight away people can see what company you represent, what the products are that you're showcasing and trying to promote. The challenge and the downside is that it does require obviously more resource from you, generally more expense, and can be more restrictive, not necessarily able to lead the show and do other activities around just being there. I think one of the things as an exhibitor for a show is that a lot of people put a lot of time and effort and energy in getting the stand to look as attractive and appealing as it can, and that's definitely a key aspect of having a successful show from an exhibitor point of view. But what I would say is it's not just about creating this great stand and then just waiting and hoping that the footfall from people coming past is going to be enough to get that return on investment that you need. You can't rely on that, and it's really, again, preparation before that show, letting people know that you're there, and reaching out and getting as many meetings fixed of good potential prospects or good potential suppliers, collaborators, whatever your objectives are for the show. I can't stress enough, you need to put in the legwork beforehand and try and fix those meetings up. And driving people to your stand constantly in the run-up to the show as well is key to make sure you really do get the most out of it. In terms of then making the most of the show, once you're there, either as an attendee, and some of this will also relate to being an exhibitor, but once you're there, and hopefully you've done the prep, and you've got some meetings fixed, you know what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve. Make sure you know what answers you're looking to gain out of the show and being in that market as well. So what questions are you trying to answer? That top point should say on that slide. So which are the questions that you need to answer by being at the show, or speaking to relevant people at the show? People at trade fairs give away a lot of information. It's generally quite a buzzing place, so people are quite happy to interact. to give you lots of advice and insight. So before you get there, and once you get there, then it's about really finding the answers to those questions that you need and that you're looking for. When it comes to being an exhibitor, one of the things again is data capture. You will have a lot of people potentially passing by your stand. How are you going to capture some of the data and the information that they're giving you? And also, how are you going to qualify those people that may express an interest in your products or service? For me, as much as it is a little bit old school, I've always really liked having inquiry forms on the stand. So you take the business cards and you write down information as they're giving information or once they've left the stand, trying to validate the potential of those people as a prospect and a potential client. Once you've left the show, once they've left the show, everyone goes back to their busy lives, and it's then a case of when you have them for that moment, then they're talking to you. You need to try and validate as much as possible and get as much information from those people as possible as to what they do, how what they do could potentially help you and your business. Is there a fit? Is there a business cultural value fit, for example? How big is their business? Does it fit with you and what you're trying to achieve? Could you work together? So it's really trying when you're with them to extract as much of that information as possible, write it down, try and obviously think, are they how much of a good prospect are they from a follow-up point of view, as well as you capturing that information and data, and make sure you collate that all together. If you're having meetings, I would say again, have objectives and meeting notes that you make throughout that again you can refer back to. You're going to meet a lot of people in a short space of time, and it's very easy to forget what's been said or what you've agreed you're going to do. So again, make lots of notes and what you're saying you're going to do and what they're saying they're going to do as well, so you can refer back to that when you get back from the show. Like I said, make sure social media wise everybody knows that you're going to be at the show in the run-up, and then when you're at the show as well. I know it's challenging, but being able to try and blog or do vlogs, take photos is a great way of just keeping that promotion going. And that was something I did last year for Gulf Food. I was blogging every day at the end of the day, and that was helpful because it got a bit of traction actually, and people responding back to me about the blog and getting to meet people that happened to see the blog and see that I was there as a result of that. So think about, is there ways you can do that to keep that promotion going for the duration of the show. Don't forget about networking with other exhibitors as well. If you are exhibiting, and work on building a community. If you tend to be on a UK pavilion, for example, and you're with other UK exhibitors, it's a great way, particularly if it's the first time that you're exhibiting, to gain a lot of information about the show, about the types of people that are there. Potentially they can give you market insight, they can give you contacts potentially for new customers, suppliers, collaborators, whoever it may be. So don't underestimate, having a chat with your fellow neighbours at the show and building that community up, because that can be quite a really helpful reciprocal community that you can build, and a collaboration as well. Like I mentioned with the Halal forum 2 weeks ago, I think it was now, look and see, as well as the show itself, are there any other events, networking events, seminars going on either before or after the shows on each of the days that you're there? There may be something else that you can attend to gain extra value and insight, extra contacts that may be useful for you as well. Have a look and see if there's anything that you feel could be worthwhile going to. And like I said before, if there's work to do off the stand in terms of checking out competition, trying to look at some new product development, trying to get some other insights, see if wherever possible you can try and get some time off the stand and have a look round as well. It's very easy particularly when you exhibit, to get very kind of zoned in on your little space, and it becomes a bit of a bubble. But trying to get out and about and walking around the halls a bit when there's a bit of quiet time, or going to see other people at the show that you know are there, is a valuable exercise as well. Another aspect, as I mentioned, that I wanted to touch upon here is with regards to the follow-up. So once the show is finished and you come back, hopefully with you know, whether you've gone as an exhibitor and you've got a lot of leads in your inquiry forms, for example, filled out that you now need to work through, or as an attendee you've had various meetings, and again, so you've got some potential follow-up to do there as well. If it's a case of going back to the business and you have a team or you have other people that you're going to be sharing some of this responsibility with, have a debriefing session, talk to the relevant people within the business so they know what's happened at the show, what the pros and cons have been, what you've managed to gather, and then what the strategy is going to be moving forward to maximise the time you've spent there, the people you've met, and the opportunities that you have uncovered. And then make sure, if you can, that you have the tool, what I mean by the tools ready to be able to then start the follow-up. So with that, I would say, you know, your marketing materials, are they then ready to go? Any PowerPoint presentations you may be sending out in terms of customer information, product information that people have expressed an interest in. Pricing is going to be a key one that people will start asking for quite quickly if they're interested from you know, being a customer, a distributor for you. They're going to need to have a handle on what the potential pricing could be. So again, figuring out your pricing list and how that's going to work from an international point of view is important as well, to not hold you up when you're then trying to do the follow-up. If you have got a number of leads, which hopefully you will have, a number of opportunities, it's then about prioritising and dividing those up efficiently. If you have a team or other people who are able to support with that, get those divided up. And then when it's about reaching out, do that on a personal level. I mean, you've met these people face to face, and whilst that may not be another opportunity to do so for maybe another year, should you go back to the same show, should you happen to meet in another instance, it still doesn't mean that sending a general email is necessarily going to quite cut it. And actually, you've got to think, if they've gone around and spoke to lots of other people as well, you know, if everyone else is emailing out and trying to reach out and follow up, you're just another email in their inbox. So what are you going to do to stand out? And particularly for the hot leads that you feel, gosh, there was a really good opportunity here, you want to make sure that they don't forget about you, that you are giving them a personal touch and reminding them of you and that great conversation you had and the great business opportunity that could be there for you. So for me, I've always found that, you know, getting on the phone or using WhatsApp increasingly, a personal way of reaching out to people rather than just a generic email, or even a personalised email can work, but having some interaction or trying to then potentially fix up a Skype conversation, something again where there's more of a personal interaction is far more effective than just say, oh, just bash out the emails, do the follow-up and just wait and see. It doesn't work like that. It's about building those relationships and doing it personally. If you have also agreed something in a meeting, or when you've spoken to someone that you'd send some information through by a certain time, or you'd send the pricing, or you know, they wanted to receive some samples by a certain time, make sure you stick to those timescales to show your commitment from your side as well. In the same way that then if you've asked them to commit to doing, for example, some market insight surveys with the samples that you send them, if they've said that'll take 3 weeks, you can make them adhere to those timescales as well. So, and again, it's showing mutual respect and commitment that you're potentially going to start working together and building some business together. So make sure you do that. And another, finally, is keeping the momentum going and keeping to be persistent. You go back from a show, everyone then becomes busy, becomes absorbed into the day-to-day running of what they do. So you need to keep persistent. Sometimes you'll come back and you'll find, okay, well that was a really, really good conversation, but they're still not responding to me. It may be that might ultimately go cold as a lead, but actually, if you feel there's still an opportunity, keep being persistent, keep following up. It may be a case that there's a time lag, they're not able to respond back too quickly, but they're still interested. So, you know, keep the momentum going. Make sure those leads don't go cold. And keep on it and keep pursuing those opportunities that are there as well. Finally, the last thing, because I want to leave enough time for questions, and hopefully you have some. And one of the things is always really hard in terms of how do you measure success then. So you've decided which trade fair you're doing. You've done that either as an attendee or as an exhibitor. You've then done the show, prepared for the show, gone as many meetings, insights, know what you're doing. You've done the show, you've done the follow-up. How do you know whether that was a good show? And it's hard. It's hard because as a marketing activity, you never quite know the impact that it will have, because it may be that a business opportunity actually comes along 12 months, 24 months, years afterwards because of the fact that you exhibited there, and you can't always pinpoint it back to that specific thing. It may be they see you at a trade fair, but actually they'd seen something on the internet about you before, something else before, and it was meeting at that trade fair that finally triggered something. What I would say is revisit what your objectives were in the first place. So as part of this, like I said, this whole journey of deciding to have a presence at a trade fair, what were your objectives in the first place? What was success looking like for you, and how does that now tally 3, 6, 12 months down the line when you're then reviewing the show and what's come out of it, what opportunities there may be, what insight you've gained, how that's formulated your future strategy, and that's the best way to do it really. And like I say, don't forget, some things it's very hard to pin down. I would say that generally speaking, if you do the necessary preparation and you do the follow-up, the trade fairs, certainly from my experience and out of the many that I've done over the years, can be very, very worthwhile marketing activity and exercise, and one that does deliver high return on investment if you do it in the right way. So I hope that's been useful. I've talked quite fast because I've had quite a lot to say, so I hope that's not been too much of a problem. I'd love to answer any of the questions that any of you have, so I'll pass back over to Jill, and she can let us know what questions we've got.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And as Victoria says, we're now going to begin answering the questions that have been submitted so far. As a reminder, you can still submit your questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. And our first question here from Richard. Richard's asking, is it better to exhibit on the UK pavilion or separately in an area where similar products are?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting one, and I think it depends on where in the world you're deciding to exhibit. From my perspective, if you are looking at the further flung you go, so I would say certainly Middle East and Asia, there are some benefits to being on the UK pavilion, because it ties back to the idea that British products, British brands have a high quality perception. So actually being part of a pavilion with other products, even if they're not within your category and exactly the same as what you do, you will find you'll have buyers, distributors, potential partners coming around the UK pavilion purely because they want high quality UK products. That can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. The disadvantage could be obviously that they don't necessarily know your product that well. If you go into, and generally speaking, from my experience within Europe, if you're more focused on the category that you're in, when they're the larger shows anyway, you'll find that with being in a hall with your products or services that are very similar, you'll attract people within there that are interested in that specific area that you work within. So it's a balancing act. I would say within Europe, generally, if there's an option to be within your category, your product type, service type, that can be beneficial. Further afield, where the quality aspect of being a British brand has some good weight, then potentially being part of the UK pavilion is better for you.
I'm so sorry. I was on mute there.
That's all right. I was just wondering what was happening.
Sorry, it's a comment from Michael here, a comment and a question. He's saying if you're visiting a show that's in a hotel, what's your view on renting a room for a planned meeting? You could then bring up pop-up banners, etc., and it would be cheaper than a stand, and he's feeling that it can work.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely can. I mean, last 2 weeks ago when I was at Gulf Food, we were on a shared stand. That was the sort of strategy, having a shared stand. But I needed to have meetings off-site as well for business development. And actually, somebody that I did meet. I was meeting the Emirates buyers out there, and they were visiting the show, but they had the same idea whereby they had an area that they'd rented for meetings that was again quite private and just by the exhibition. So it's definitely a good way, depending on the location of the show. If you can find somewhere potentially close by that you could rent a room or a meeting room. And then have meetings there, that can work. It's just then how you then attract those people. That's why I think if you've got somewhere that's very close to the show, that could work, a hotel room, a convention room, etc. That they can then nip out of the actual exhibition itself and come and see you. It's just making sure you then put the work in to drive that traffic, drive the traffic to you and the meetings to you as well. But definitely great way of doing it as well.
Thank you. And a question here from Hayley. Hayley's asking, how soon should you start designing your stand?
It depends on, I guess, your internal resource and how much time you need in terms of getting it ready. It depends again, are you designing the stand yourself, or are you doing it through the shell scheme and through an organizer or the pavilion? So if you're going through a pavilion, they will generally guide you, and it's a bit more minimal as to what you necessarily need to do. If you're on your own, I would say the sooner you can start doing it, the better, in terms of getting the preparation, because there's always a lot to do last minute. So the sooner you can get the design sorted, the better. And then it's a case of obviously who's going to then, do you build it within the UK like I mentioned and ship it, or do you look out to local contractors to do that? But as soon as you've made the commitment to exhibit, then I would say, certainly within the couple of months before the show is actually going to take place, the design needs to be started and progressed as soon as possible, so you can make any tweaks that you might need or any problems when it comes on the contractor side as well.
Thank you. And a question here from Roger, and you did mention it a little bit earlier in your presentation about localizing your sales material. With language barriers, is there a need to localize the sales material, having an interpreter on the stand? Any pointers on that?
I think it comes down to where the show is and the demographic of the people that are attending. So I would agree. I mean, I've done shows where we've had interpreters on the stand, and we particularly for China, that can be challenging from a language point of view. So I would say that certainly for China, consider potentially having some local interpreting and support, and potentially marketing materials translated as well into the local language. But if obviously you're there, China's a key market, and you want to show your commitment and being serious to that market. So I would say for some markets like China, yes, it is worth doing. Otherwise, it depends. I mean, I would say for more European shows or less of an issue. It's always helpful. I mean, I'm a linguist myself. It's always helpful to have somebody that can speak various languages on a stand. Is it a prerequisite? Not necessarily for the European markets and some of the Middle Eastern markets. Having said that, if you do, you're able to translate some of your materials, even if it's just, for example, when I was out in Brazil, what we did was we had most of our catalogues all in English. We didn't want to go to the expense of translating into Portuguese, but what we did was we just had a one-page flyer that we had translated, very sort of short piece that was very, didn't cost a lot from a translation point of view, and it was quite easy and cheap to print off as well.
Thank you very much. And a question from Laura, which I guess is the million-dollar question: what makes people stop at your stand?
Yeah, that's it. I guess one of the things I didn't really mention is when it comes to sort of samples of products and promotional items of products. And what I would say is if you're able, and it depends on what you sell, some industries it's easier than others. I mean, obviously the food and drink industry, if you're selling food and drink, it's great because you have a hook. People like, oh, this looks interesting, I like to try some of that, and you're sampling. It can be a really efficient way of pulling people in because they can see it, they can taste it, and they stop by. And when I was on a stand for some vitamins, for example, effervescent tablets, well, they took 90 seconds to dissolve. And what was great was people would love the look of it. They could see it fizzing, but at the same time, so that would draw people in. They were interested in what it was. Could they try it? But also then, because you had the time lag of about 90 seconds for it to dissolve, you had the time to qualify them and start engaging in conversation with them, actually validating, is this actually somebody interesting that we could actually do some business with? Are they a good contact? If not, have a sample, off you go. Actually, if you are really interesting, and this is, you could then engage with them further, and obviously they had the time to try the product. So if you've got something that they can try and taste, or it's multi-sensory, that always helps. And then once you get people stopping by your stand, it's like crowds attract crowds as well. I always find that that helps. If you've got people stopping by, other people seem to be interested in what's going on here. So it is trying to be inventive. Promotional items are another thing that depends. Lots of people can take lots of them, so they can be quite expensive. An expensive exercise, but having something that you can offer people, particularly if they're either high-level leads or something low cost, but again promotional, and it's helping people to stop by that you can engage with, can be useful as well. And I would say from a stand design, just as a final point of view, it's about also making sure that you create an open space, you create a stand that's welcoming, as opposed to what a lot of people do is they'll put their reception desks and their other shelving and desks and literature stands all around the outside of the stand, the products behind, but then it doesn't create that come on to the stand feeling. It sort of creates a bit of a barrier physically between you and them. So it's again trying to make sure the stand designer's got that welcoming feel and inviting you on, plenty of light, plenty of openness as well is helpful.
Thank you, Victoria. And being very conscious of everybody's time, we'll just take, we've had a couple of questions in on a similar subject, and so I'll just sort of merge them together. From both Michael and Malcolm. Michael is saying that the positioning of a stand, the booth number, taking into account the flow and dynamics, and also Malcolm is asking, assuming the grid system layout for the fair, which areas would you recommend for your stand to be located? Are the edges very poor versus the central avenues?
Yeah, stand location is another key one that if you get it right, it's brilliant. You can be very busy. You get it wrong, you can have a quiet show. I would say from my experience, I always find that from a positioning point of view, or the type of stand, if you can get a corner stand, they can be a little bit more expensive, but they're effective. They give you then at least 2 open sides, which again creates that openness with the stand. Plus as well, you have the opportunity to be getting traffic from two different aisles because you're on a corner. So that would help maximise traffic and allows you to potentially reach out to the two aisles that you will intersect with a corner stand. So I'd always say have a look at corner stands wherever possible, or even the ends of stands where you can maybe have 3 open sides. The more open, the better. When it comes to actually whereabouts within a hall, again, it's looking at, because again there's a decision about halls, which hall do you choose, which I've already mentioned, and then whereabouts within the hall. Now, if there are conferences going on or seminars and there's a space where that seminar is taking place, if you know there's going to be traffic going in and out quite regularly, and what's happening in that conference or seminar is useful, and it's got potential people that you want to talk with, being close to that can be useful as well. Generally, when you go inside halls, it would be, and being closer to the front of the hall as you're coming in, again, you'll capture more people. If you're further at the back of a hall, it takes people more time and longer to filter to the back, and they don't always get there. So I would say, again, being fairly close in, if you can, as from where the main entrance or the main doors to that hall are as well, are useful.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and we have overrun, so just any closing remarks before we finish? I have dropped your contact details into the chat box out to the audience, so if anyone wants to copy those before we finish, then please do so.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like I said, there is an e-guide that I do have available. If anybody did want to email me for that, I'm more than happy to send that over. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I hope people have found that useful. There's a lot to cover in this area, and you can get into a lot more nitty-gritty with it, but hopefully that's given most of you a really useful insight, some hints and tips, some nuggets of wisdom that you can take away and hopefully implement, and make your attendance or your exhibiting at an international trade fair in the future that even bit more successful. And best of luck to everyone as well.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. It's just 3 really quick questions, so we would appreciate it if you could keep your browser window open and complete that and provide your feedback for us. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 hours, which will include a link to view a recording of today's webinar. The slides will be sent out under separate email. On behalf of the Department for International Trade and our presenter, Victoria, thank you so much for joining us, and please do all enjoy the rest of the day and your weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.